Welcome to today's Vitocrossal 200 CM2 product overview webinar. My name is Miranda Getling and I'm the Academy Manager here at Viessmann. I wanted to take this opportunity to just say thank you for attending today. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy during this time and hopefully have been able to enjoy some spring weather. It's a gorgeous day here in Rhode Island, so hopefully I'll be able to get outside later today. Today, your webinar instructor will be Jay Sheldon. Jay has been with Viessmann for the last 5 years. The first 3 years, he was a member of the Technical Service Department before moving into his current role as the Academy Training Instructor. Jay has a master license, has been in the heating and cooling industry for the past 30 years, including holding job titles as General Manager, Service Manager, and owner of his own company for 14 years. Jay is a United States Army vet and loves to spend time with his wife, 2 children, and 2 grandsons. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Everyone will stay muted throughout the webinar. However, you do have the ability to ask any questions you have through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. On the left, you will see the desktop laptop version, and on the right is the mobile device version. Jay will be stopping about halfway through the presentation and at the end to answer any questions submitted, so feel free to pop them in there at any time. We will be recording this webinar so you can view it later, and it will be posted in the video library, which is located on the Academy website. And there's 2 ways to locate the video library: through the header of the page up top, or if you scroll down, there is a video library section where you can click on and enter that video library. Once you are in there, you will see up top, we have updated this to have a search function now. So you could simply type in Vitocrossal 200 CM2 product overview and the video will populate, or any keywords in regards to this topic. We also have the drop down. It will be in the recorded webinars section, and then it will also be in the Vitocrossal 200 CM2 section, as this is a product specific webinar. So with that being said, let's begin. Here is Jay Sheldon.
Thank you, Miranda, and welcome everybody to today's webinar on the Vitocrossal CM2 overview. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and spending about an hour and a half. We can make it longer depending on the questions. Hopefully you all come and get your answers that you're looking for. So this is pretty much just going to be an overview of the spoiler itself in a nutshell. So we're just going to be talking about what the boiler could do and all different things like that. But before we get started, I just seeing that this is an overview on the product itself. It's pretty much for people that haven't really seen the boiler or just getting refreshed on the boiler. And before we get started, just to talk a little bit about the company itself. So if you don't know anything about the company, we can go over just a few slides here, and then we'll jump right into the CM2. So what we're looking at here is Viessmann Manufacturing in Allendorf, Germany. This is the manufacturer that makes pretty much all our wall hungs, and believe it or not, they actually make our air conditioning units here as well, which haven't made it to the U.S. market here in the U.S. But anyways, talking about the Allendorf, this is our warehouse here. What we're looking at, our warehouse, is that big white building. So you can see it's pretty large because that's a full sale size train right there in the front, as well as full size trucks. That's the first story of this building, and that goes down 6 stories. So it's a pretty massive building, and it's all animated pick. So everything's picked by animation. So talk about the company a little bit here. We're on our 4th generation. So Maximilian took over about a year and a half ago from Dr. Martin Viessmann. And Dr. Martin Viessmann was to take the boilers from his father, because this is a family-owned business. And his father had all the boilers sitting on the floor, and Martin's vision was to take the boilers, make them more efficient, hang them on the wall. So now that we've been doing that for the last 20 years or so, Max has a new vision, and he's more of into electronics and how communication, can we get these boilers to talk to people as well as to our tech support. So that's what he's been doing in the last year. So we got some exciting things coming on, our new boilers coming out within the next year or so. As you can see, we employ over 12,000, I think it's 12,500 employees, which thank God right now, most everybody is working. So thank goodness for you guys out there putting these boilers in as well. We're in over 74 countries distributing these boilers. And my key thing here is that we train over 90,000 people a year throughout all of Viessmann. So that's pretty interesting right there in itself. Just to go back here real quick, just to let you know that this boiler, this manufacturing company is 100% off the grid. So this is about a mile long and about 3/4 miles wide. And they produce their own electricity, they produce their own fuels, as well as they own thousands of acres of poplar trees for their biomass boilers to heat the plant. So they harvest these trees every year, which regrow, and then they reharvest them every 3 years. So they go to different sections of their plantation. So all of this here is all farmland around here as well. So they actually gather all the cow dung and the manure from all the different farmers, and they produce their own methane gas with a system that they have set up here on the facility, so they can produce methane, as well as they can do it wet style with all the corn stalks and all the vegetations. So there's a couple of ways that they make natural gas and propane. So it's a really neat facility, and they've been doing that for the last 20, 25 years. Here in the US, we haven't got that far yet because our fuel is so cheap. Just imagine your fuel bill about 3 times more than it is. So here's our manufacturing plant for the boiler that we're going to be talking about today, the Vitocrossal CM2. This is actually in Berlin, Germany. And it looks like a lot of new things here since I've been here. I was there about 4.5 years ago on the project for the CA3, which is our other commercial boiler. So they actually have a facility here where you stay, and then you learn about their production and their boilers there in Berlin. Here is our facility in Warwick, where I hope to see you guys all soon, or gals, to come here and do live hands-on training, as well as all these classroom is up here. So all these webinars and things that I'm doing are part of our presentations. And then all our live fire is up here in this round part here, where you can actually do all hands-on servicing of the boiler, troubleshooting of the boilers. We have residential all the way up to commercial. And right before this all started, we were working on the commercial aspect of it as well. Before we leave this, one more thing I'd like to show is this is an important website. If you like Viessmann's product or want to know anything about Viessmann's product, if you go to viessmannus.com, you can do searches, or even go to that website you went to today, the Viessmann Academy, and also just go up to the menu, and then you can find Pro Resources. What I like about Pro Resources is you can get all your current manuals, as well as your historic manual. So when I was in tech support, I did a lot of the historical product because I'm the old guy in the company, I guess. No, actually, I put a lot of the older product in so that you can find all the information that you need for our older products here as well. So if you come up upon anything, as well as our Academy website has tons of videos on some of our older products as well. So a lot of helpful stuff there as well. Here I like the product code checker here. So it's a fault code checker. So any fault on any of our boilers, if you get a fault, you go here. Or I save this whole page as a favorite to my phone. It kind of looks like an app, but it's just a favorite. And then I can get to any of this information as I need it. So it's very helpful. So that fault code checker, when you punch in the fault, it will ask you what boiler you're working on. You choose on what boiler you're working on, then it will tell you what the fault is, how to fix it, and then do you want to see the manual. As well as our parts catalog is on here, as well as for commercial, our Vito spec engineering specifications for products, stuff that you might need for the jobs, as well as residential. There's a lot of helpful tools in there, as well as any commercial application here, how to pipe or vent boilers. Our product reference guide's a good selling tool for you when you're selling these products to your customers. It just has all little tidbits of information which you might need for the boilers as well. As well as our Viessmann Academy website. So when you were here today to sign up for these classes, you can see any of our webinars that we've been doing in the past months or so, as well as the ones we did prior to this, as well as we have videos on how-tos, how to clean some of the boilers as well as on there. And we're still producing more as we're speaking now. Here's Viessmann's product line here. So we have our 200 boilers that can be a commercial application. So a rack of our 200 boilers, which you can rack up to 8 of those boilers on a rack system and have 4 boilers on a common vent system with a control that's very similar to the CM2 control to control all the boilers. So as you can see, there's our natural gas, and then we do also sell a residential oil boiler, which I like. It's a really nice triple pass oil boiler, as well as our oil commercial boiler, the VD2, which is you can do dual fuel, which we have one set up in our facility. So you can see just with a flip of a switch how you can switch from oil to gas that easy. As well as our CA3 has a switch on it that you can switch and have it dual fuel for propane and natural gas. And with just a flip of a switch in the front of the boiler, it does everything automatically for you. With the different boilers, we do make and produce our own heat exchangers as well. So with the 200 heat exchangers, we're looking at that round inox radial heat exchanger. It's titanium infused stainless steel. Same with the inox Crossal, which is going to be in the Vitocrossal 200 that we're going to be talking about, that CM2 boiler today, and see how that works as well. And then inox laminar is in our Vitocrossal 300, which can handle much higher pressures. That was designed, the Vitocrossal was strictly designed for the US market 4 years ago actually. Here's our VD2 oil boiler here. This is what it looks like. It is a cast iron boiler, and as you can see at the bottom there, it comes into from 16 different sizes from 490,000 BTUs right up to 4.2 million BTUs. And as you can see, you can run it oil only, natural gas, propane, or dual fuel it. Nice boiler, reminds me a lot of my oil Viessmann boiler that I put in 22 years ago. Still running strong. So they make a very good cast iron boiler as well. With that being said, before we jump into that, just to show you that Academy website, if you happen to go there and join us today, all you really have to do is to get into that pro login, pro resources. It's right here. You click on that pro resources, and there you go. Anything you want to click on is here for you, as well as that fall code checker. And then I just saved that to my iPhone or my Android. I have an iPhone for work and a Droid for myself. So they both have it on there. So any information or anybody ever calls me, I can look it up pretty quick. Okay, with that being said, we're going to jump right into the CM2. And again, before we get started, I really want to thank everybody for coming and spending your hour and a half with us today here at our Viessmann webinar. And hopefully you make sure you ask your questions, get your questions. If I don't know the answer, we will send out that with a form of, I fill them all out, I'll get the answers answered, or I answer them, and then we email them within the next week or so back out to everybody so you can see everybody's questions and answers. So make sure you ask your questions. I can't see who sent them in. All I do is fill them in with the answers. Oh, by the way, Miranda, here's my new updated picture for me. So we can put that up in the beginning, because this is what I look like now, being home now for about, I don't even know how long I've been home anymore. I lost track. Never in my life I've been this long at home working, or have here this long. So today, what we're going to kind of cover today is the benefits, the features of the boiler, some common applications of the boiler. We'll show you a few ways of how we ship out the boilers. There's a couple of available ways, and you'll find that it's beneficial in both ways to get shipped different ways. Want to make sure we can get it into the building as well. So these are, we're going to give you measurements and different different ways as well. So looking at the CM2 here, we got the smaller sizes on the left-hand side. So you can see that it has only one door on this one here. And then on the larger size is actually two doors in the front. Application ranges anywhere from apartment buildings, commercial applications, district heating, new buildings, retrofits. This boiler can go in a lot of different places. The nice thing is you can have up to 8 of these boilers in the cascade system as well, using the control right on the boiler itself. So now you can see it's been all ASME rated, all the certificates needed. So we have quite a bit of high standards on this boiler here as well, which last year was just approved for Southern California's ranges as well. To hit the very low NOx. So we'll talk about the sizes of the boilers here and the BTU outputs. So up to a few years ago, you got these boilers in kilowatts. So that's what that number up here is really representing, is kilowatts of the boiler, but it's also the model of the boiler. So now in the last few years, they put all our boilers into BTUs. So that was nice. So I don't have to talk about kilowatts here in the US. We're the only ones that really talk about BTUs. Everywhere else in the world, they talk about kilowatts instead of BTUs. So now we're looking at the smallest from the 663,000 BTUs, the 878,000, 1.1 million, 1.4 million, 1.8 million, and then the 2.2 million BTU boilers. It gives you the outputs in natural gas as well as into propane on this boiler here. And we do have adjustments for our altitude, so we'll get into that a little bit down the road here. Combustion efficiency, as you can see, we're in the high 95s here, which is phenomenal for a high efficient boiler in today's day and age compared to what I had to work with on the old stuff. Not even close to this type of an efficiency. So it's always amazing to see these numbers come out with a thermal efficiency of 97%. And normally with commercial, you're going to be talking about more of your thermal efficiency over your combustion efficiency. Here is our overall dimensions of the boilers itself. So now you can see with the different sizes, the dimensions. So these are the things that you want to look at to make sure that you can get it into the doorways and how you're going to get it in. So they range, and they're still pretty decent to get into the buildings. So these can get into a lot of different buildings where the CA3 it's limited to access, but now they have a process of actually tearing that boiler down to get it into anybody's building as well. So, talking about your weights here, so you can see your body weight only, and then completed weights with your burner on, your jacket, everything installed on it. So stripped down as well as completely assembled. We go anywhere from 503 pounds up to 1,400 pounds. So some of the sections I used to put in were about 1,400 pounds. So you can see the boiler's really not as heavy as the older style cast iron boilers. Talking about high water volume, Viessmann likes to talk about high water volume, less run cycles. And with this boiler here, there's no flow switches to activate. Now you can see allowable working pressures as well as working temperatures. Anywhere from 190 from the smallest boilers up to 203 on your largest temperature-wise, and then your maximum working pressures. Like I was talking about earlier, this boiler is designed for very low NOx. It even meets the standards in Texas as well as Southern California, which has the lowest NOx emissions in the United States. So that was just approved, I believe it was finally approved last year. There's a lot of work to get that approved as well, because there's a lot of testing involved here in the US, and it's a costly process as well. But if you don't know what NOx is, it's a contributor to nitrous oxide, nitrous oxide. So we reduce that by quite a bit. The really neat thing I like about when you get to come and see this boiler and hear it is how actually quiet this boiler is to run. I'm amazed as how quiet, and a lot of people are as well, when they're standing in the boiler room and it's been running for 5 minutes and they're asking me to fire the boiler. And I turn and say that it's been running for the last 5 minutes. So it's extremely quiet boiler. Usually all you're going to hear on the initial startup is the clicking of the valves checking each other, and as well as your pressure switches being checked. So it is a very quiet, high efficient boiler. So as you can see, decibel wise, whereas lower than an actual refrigerator. Not only are we quiet, we're and efficient, thermally efficient, voltage wise, we're efficient, and consumption wise, we're efficient as well. So with this boiler here, we're only doing about bringing only 120 volts over to power this boiler. And as you can see, the wattage on this boiler is extremely low. The wattage it's about as low as a CPU on the small ones, as a CPU on a computer, and maybe on the larger ones like a toaster. So very low wattage usage. So its efficiency as with power consumption as well. Let's look at your clearances around the boiler. As you can see, zero clearance all the way around the boiler. Vent clearance, you want to take a look at that because it's per manufacturer. What I always like to talk about is make sure you give yourself some service clearance. Once these boilers, I know they always give us the biggest, largest rooms to put these boilers in. They give us all the room in the whole building to do it, right? But make sure you give enough room for the next guy to come and service, because what I've seen a lot of times is guys are putting these boilers in and they're not coming back to service them. So just think about the next guy that has to come in and squeeze themselves in here, like myself, getting their belly behind the back of the boiler and trying to get in there. So just give yourself some clearance, because all your wiring is done in the back of the boiler. So before you sign off on this boiler, all your safety checks have to be done. So a lot of that wiring and disconnecting and things like that are done on the back of the boiler. As well as this boiler can swing left or right. The burner can swing left or right for annual maintenance. So you want to make sure if you're doing multiple boilers, you're not swinging into the other door, as well as not swinging into the other gas pipes or the gas pipe for this boiler. So make sure you're looking at it for serviceability. This boiler can be set up as easy for low altitude sea level, as well as high altitude mountain level. And I just thought we make it nice pictures here for low altitude, because I'd like to be sitting on that beach right now as winter has passed and my mountain climbing days are done. So sitting there with a nice beer on a nice warm day like today would be nice. Or maybe even go back to work so I can get away from my wife's work, because I stay more work here. There's no time off. I have to work past 5 o'clock here. So let's look at the inside of the boiler here. So now we're looking at the cutaway of the boiler. So you can see your supply and return on your piping. There are ANSI flanges coming off the top. So you're going to just tie in your ANSI flanges in there. As well as there's our inox Crossal heat exchanger. So you can see how that's made. And our flue gases are getting blown inside here. And our water is all surrounding all of that as well, and going in between the other section. So we're getting all that flue gases to bounce off the inner Crossal part of that pattern. So for each gallon of condensate that we can collect on that condensate, we're actually grabbing about 8,000 BTUs before it leaves the boiler. So that's what's making these boilers efficient. And that's why we got to talk about piping correctly, pumps correctly, and getting these boilers to condense to make them efficient. Because if we're not getting that return waters down, to like the 130, 135 range. We're not going to condense in these boilers. So we got to get and do things with this boiler to make sure we're getting it to condense. It does come with the Vitatronic GW6P touchscreen boiler control. When you usually even for this class here, when you come in, we do a little touching. I have simulators that I made so you can actually touch the touchscreens and set up and go through the startup wizard. And then we actually do a little cascading at the end where we tie in some boilers as well. We got the matrix cylinder gas burner. The insulation on the boiler is 4 inches thick, and this boiler does not emit any heat at all. It's usually from the piping itself. And then once you get the piping wrapped, it now becomes a pretty cold boiler room. Compared to what used to be in the boiler rooms. Cast iron emits a lot of heat out of it. Now you can see why these boilers are efficient, and their standby loss is very minimal. So a lot of times the next complaint is your boiler room is cold, so sometimes you're adding some type of heater inside the boiler room, and maybe just to become a little creative, tie that onto your return, so we're kind of returning lower temperatures going back to the boiler. So it is a water-cooled combustion chamber on this boiler here as well. So there's no target wall or anything like that to shoot on. The frame itself, and then small things amuse small minds. This boiler here does come with adjustable feet. And for people out on the West Coast, we actually sell seismic feet as well for seismic adjustments for your boiler as well. But I think that's pretty cool where you can adjust your feet to level off the boiler. And that's on any of our floor standing equipment, our indirect storage tanks, our oil boilers. So small things, sitting there smashing coppers or plates or things like that where we can just adjust with a wrench. Life is good. So just looking at the inner part of the heat exchanger, and down here, what you're looking at is your condensate holes here. So part of your maintenance, you want to take a look at that. And with this boiler here, basically, we're going to be flushing it out to clean it with a hose. So you can see now that it is that 316 titanium fused stainless steel. And just remember what temperatures we have over here with that burner firing, over 1800 degrees there. And then with that condensate being acidic as it is, why we got to have such a good quality stainless steel heat exchanger. Looking at the boiler strip down, left, right, front, back, top. And you'll see on the smaller sizes, it's actually going to have a much greater pitch than the larger sizes. And they did that with the smaller ones to hit that 95% efficiency. Just a slight more tilt to it, and it created a much higher efficiency, believe it or not. So looking at all your different things on the boiler, like I said, your door can hinge left or right, just a matter of switching the hinge left or right. Temperature safety devices usually is going to go in on some of them are going to be here on the back side of that outlet. And you'll see it looks like a Aquastat well where you're going to put your safety limits like your number 3A and your 3B sensors. And we'll talk about those a little bit down the road here. They all have the ANSI flanges, as well as they do come with the relief valve or the low water cutoff, because you do not have to, this is not a flow activated flow switch here on this boiler, but you do have to have a low water cutoff on here. As well as it's shipped out with a fast venting high vent, and that's going to go into that outlet for your safety valves. Talk about shipment a little bit here. So if you were getting this boiler shipped disassembled to you, this is the way the boiler is going to get shipped out to you, so you can get it through your doorways or whatnot, but you're going to have to install that. And if you do, if you've never installed this, jackets and the control and the wiring and all of that stuff that has to come on this boiler, give yourself about 4 hours, 4.5 hours. And if you were in a union job, maybe 7 hours. No, I'm just joking. I was in a union shop at one time. So just give you some time, and you'll probably have to be billable hours to assemble that as well. So depending on how you're going to do it, we do at no charge ship it out to you fully assembled. So that boiler does get it fully assembled. This is how it would get shipped out to you, with hardboard all packed around the boiler with bubble wrap, all of that stuff. What I do recommend is when you do get it on the job site and you're moving it around, just remove all the jackets. They come off pretty simple and easy. That way they don't get all crushed and damaged, because a lot of the work I see out there, even commercial, residential, it's become artwork. And the last thing we want to do is have this beautiful, nice looking job with all crushed jackets from the guy standing on it, from the pipe wrap guy. So that venting, here's our venting material options here. So we can use the polypropylene, stainless steel. CPVC is one other thing that you can vent with. I don't think they have flexible venting in that size, but it could be an option. But just remember, any type of flexible venting is corrugated. So you're going to get some flow restrictions from your fan there. So they usually tell you to increase your size to the next size larger. Here are some of your approved methods, but remember they do have to meet the ULC standards. And I would follow the vent manufacturer's guidelines as far as what you can and cannot do. Follow ours for your maximum allowable footage, whether it be combined, your fresh air and exhaust combined, or bringing in fresh air. And we also have in the manual itself, they do show how to make a fresh air intake with a filter. What I've seen a lot of is where we're sucking these fresh air from, or room dependent air, and then it's working its way into the burner tube itself. So just make sure you have some type of protection before it gets into the burner tube. Sorry. So Duravent and Centrotherm have changed their standards, I think, recently, up to recent. So that's why I'm saying follow their standards, because I think their pitches have changed. They want a more of a dramatic pitch now on their pipe, their horizontal piping. So as you can see, the PVC Schedule 40, but that's going to be a CPVC Schedule 40. With this boiler here, your fresh air intake does come with this boot that you attach directly to the burner if you're going to do fresh air from outside. And now you can see it actually goes underneath the boiler and comes out the back, and then you would tie in your vent adapter. If you're taking room dependent air, you might want to put some type of snorkel up in the room so nothing's falling in here, because this is like a gigantic vacuum here. So last thing we do when we're leaving the job site after we're finished, we're sweeping the floor and sweeping that all into that nice big vacuum cleaner. Venting methods for two pipe. So we get the horizontal, vertical, and hybrid. With multiple boilers, you can have 4 of these boilers common vented on one common vent, up to 8 boilers on a system. So that means you would only have to drill 4 holes if you had 8 boilers. I tend to try to stay with the common venting, the hybrid type of system, and try to separate that flue gas as much as possible from the fresh air intake. Be aware this is in our manual, so take a look at our venting manual, see what our recommendations is. I always bring that up. I always like to leave this picture in here because I've seen a lot of issues with finished grade. We tend to forget about finished grade, residential and commercial both. I've seen it in both when I was in tech support. We put it in before finished grade, and then they bring up the level 2 feet and then add mulch to it. And guess what? Now you're about 5 inches from ground level. So just be aware of that. Make sure you're asking before you drill your hose, am I at ground level? Because that big vacuum will suck mulch right into it as well. It's amazing what this thing can suck in here, as well as the CA3. It does say here for longer vents, contact Viessmann or vent manufacturer. Sometimes we can increase the pipe lengths by increasing your pipe size. And the other thing you want to be aware of is your 90s and your 45s, the maximum, as that adds footage. And I always bring that up at the same time, as well as in your gas piping, your venting. Elbows do mean footage. So when you're doing gas piping, count your 90s, because that's so many feet of gas piping. And that's where a lot of guys tend to forget that 90s, 45s, and all of that add footage to your piping. So a lot of times we find that when we go out there, the gas piping undersized because of too many 90s. Same thing with your venting. So venting, your 90s are part of your calculation. So make sure you're checking them in the manuals and what their recommendations are. With multiple venting, you would now add in or common venting rather, you would add in a vent damper on each boiler, which comes in the vent damper kit. And so that you can have these firing individually and then pumping flue gases into the next boiler. And the way these are, you can have one start as your lead boiler, and then have it rotate after so many hours, or cast lead to lag. And then you can rotate your boilers on run hours, or you can do it on the first day of the month, let's say. So there's a lot of different ways that you can have that lead boiler now become a lag boiler as well. So you can have even run hours on all your boilers. And like I was saying earlier, that 3% pitch might have changed. I have not been able to have time to take a look at that, and I'll take a look at it and then change as needed. But that's why I'm saying we're not a vent manufacturer. So make sure you're following the vent manufacturer's guidelines as far as pitching and what they recommend. We do want to make sure that that condensate is getting out and not filling up the boiler. So make sure these boilers already have a trap underneath them. No double trapping your condensate. That was probably the second or first largest thing I see with residential as well as commercial, is improper condensate hookups. That means that that water can fill up that heat exchanger and stop, the fan can't overcome it. So just be aware, it takes a lot to fill up this heat exchanger too. More so on the CA3 because we're shooting down into that fire chamber. So this is how that would install on the back of the boiler. It's just a couple of stainless steel clamps. They clamp onto the back, and then you would clamp your pipe onto the other side of that. This is what they do look like. This is an older picture here. I just got them so you could see a good picture of that servo motor. Searching now for new pictures because this is an old picture of our test facility in Berlin. And they're just showing you a bunch of them hooked up into a common vent system here. And then just showing that our older boilers had a stainless steel flue collector. It's now a polypropylene flue collector. When you're hooking up that internal vent damper, there's a couple connections in the back, and then the plug goes from the back of the boiler to the front of the boiler and ties into near the burner control. So now you can see all your wiring is done on that DIN rail. That's why I'm always saying, give yourself enough room in the back for heavy guys to get back there and work on wiring or check our safeties, or going back in the future to do any safety checks. As you can see, that when you add this damper and you plug it in, that APS2 switch now has to make sure that it is open. and it proves that it's open for the boiler to fire. So that's one of the safeties on this burner control here, is that ASP2 switch for your damper. And part of your startup wizard is going to ask you, do you have that or don't have that? So make sure you, if you're not using a vent area, you're doing a single boiler, you take that out. So Joukowsky effect. And what is the Joukowsky effect? I leave this on our presentation because, believe it or not, we've had this happen with our boiler, and then I've had guys in my class that have fixed their boilers as well from other brands. So Joukowsky effect is we got a flue pipe and we got flue flying up there, and all of a sudden we have an abrupt stop, shut off, and it will actually create a vacuum inside here and implode your flue pipe. We'll actually squish it in. So with that being said, we had to talk to the engineers. The engineers came down and they looked at it, and then they figured out what was going on with it. So we do sell a device. It's for this here that will help with this phenomenon here. And like I said, it doesn't just happen with our boiler. It happens with the other brands and pretty popular brands as well. And I'm glad it has helped people fix their problems, because as we know, sometimes we run into this tunnel that we're trying to chase something and we can't find out. But luckily for us, the Viessmann's engineers figured this out, and they came up with this vacuum breaker. This vacuum relief damper, all it does is when that vacuum occurs, this vacuum opens and breaks the vacuum. Pretty simple device for a very costly, it could be a very costly problem. I think the one that we were looking at was about an $18,000 flue. So for a few $100s here, you can get this vacuum breaker. So I always leave that in my presentations just so you can see it, because it's a phenomenon that a lot of us haven't really heard of until it happens. And as you can see down here, that Pro Resources talks about it as well. So there's a lot of neat things on that Pro Resources. I go on there all the time just to learn about different things on our product as well. Looking at the front of the boiler itself, on the smaller boilers, the burner is mounted right on the door, so you're mounting the burner door with the burner. Now you can see this, you can swing it left or right. Make sure when you're doing this, you're leaving those two screws loose until you mount these 4 bolts, and then tighten that. Then that door will swing open nice. So leave them loose here, and then tighten your front bolts, and then tighten here. And then that kind of puts the hinge in the right position. On the larger boilers, the burner is going to get slid through the burner door. So the burner door is mounted. Now you're going to pick up the burner and slide it through the hole in the burner door. Or on the smaller ones, as you can see, it's the smaller ones, the door is like your flange on the mounting your flange. Sight hold door, I always kind of giggle at the sight hold door because you can't see much but like a glow inside there. But you can see that the burner is on. Still looking at the front of the boiler here and the burner itself. What we have here is these enrichment dampers, they call them. So when these boilers go to start, this on the larger boilers here, that enrichment damper will close. So these are actually shutters, and they close down. So what it does is it gives a lot less air to the burner itself. So it gives it a nice smooth start on light up. That's why I say even on light up, this boiler is a nice smooth and starting boiler. On the smaller models, they use, they don't have the the damper control on it. On the smaller ones, they use hoses with stops inside them, so it actually puts pressure onto the gas valve to give it less gas. So they do it the opposite way there and starve it for fuel that way. And so it gives it a nice smooth startup as well. Looking at your electrode ignitions on the left-hand side there, your ignition module, That's a nice thing about Viessmann. Everything's replaceable. You can get to everything really simple and easy to get to things on these boilers in service. That's what I liked about their boilers, is they're easy to service and maintain. Over the fire door switch here, so we have a combustion pressure switch here. So that's right next to that ASP2 switch. Remember that one for your back food damper. And that one's right next to it. With the door swung open here, now you can see the burner cylinder, ionization electrodes, our ignition electrode, and then that sight door that we're looking into. Just be aware on the smaller ones, and we offer service maintenance classes on these as well. So when you come in, we actually take this apart and see how to service them. So on the smaller ones, that ionization electrode is a loop electrode. So you actually have to go on the other side of the door, take the nut off. There's only one nut holding that on for the boot, for the electrode boot. If you pull that off, take the one nut, and then you can slide this right out this way. And then you can take your porcelain out from the other side. But it is a loop, so it's not going to allow you to pull it through here. Just a little helpful tool there. So let's just take a look at this burner. I thought that was pretty cool. They did a live fire on the burner outside the boiler itself, just so you can take a look at it, what it looks like. It's going to change a little bit because it is not in a closed combustion chamber, so you're going to get some air filtration around it. But for the amount of BTUs of these boilers, it's always amazing to me to see that little rinky-dink flame there. Some of the boilers I worked on, the flames were about 15 feet long for these size boilers. So as you can see, it stays to that stainless steel mesh on that burner tube. Pretty much it maintains that. And that's why I always talk about making sure on your PVC shavings, you're blowing out all your fresh air intake pipes when you're cutting them, because they will work their way inside that mesh. On the other side, there's a stainless steel tube in there, and then this fine mesh covers over it here. So you don't want to get that plastic in there, melt inside the tube and create some hot spots for you. So now you can see that flame sensor at the bottom. This is the larger ones. So remember, on the smaller ones, it has the loop one. And then on the larger ones, you can actually pull right out from the front. Now they're ramping it up to 100% of the firing rate. And you can do that right off the front of this, right on the burner control, because we want, when you first fire this boiler, they want to have it checked in low fire as well as high fire. And you'll see that coming down in the presentation as far as how to make adjustments with your gas valve. But you need the proper tools to do that, as far as your analyzer, as well as a manometer as well. So as you can see, the blue part of the flame is what's really modulating up and down. When it was at high fire, it was maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch. And now we're in low fire. There's pretty much not much of that blue flame left. And shuts down. So it was a neat little video. So here we're looking at the larger boiler here. So now you can see that on the larger boilers, you're going to mount the burner through the door. On the smaller models, like I said, you're mounting the door and the burner together. As you can swing the doors left or right, same thing on the larger models. Something happened here. Sorry about that. Sometimes when I show a video, it won't allow me to progress after I get out of it. So when you get that boiler and you get the burner tube, you're gonna make sure that this plastic sleeve is over the burner tube, because when we're sliding it through that hole on the boiler door, that's actually like a K-wool fireproof blanket in between there. So when you're sliding it through, you don't want to get all that K-wool all up inside your mesh. It makes a mess and it's really hard to clean out. So they send out this burner with this plastic tube over it so you can slide it in and out. So at this point here, make sure you ask your questions. Remember, the only dumb question you ask is the one you don't ask. So remember, you ask your questions, get your answers.
Looks like we do not have any questions at this point, Jay.
All right, did I already put you guys to sleep? That was pretty quick. Just joking. I like to joke. Let's continue on then. We'll talk about our piping connections and our gas connections, condensate, and our supply drains. All of that are right here for you. Our venting diameters coming off the back of the boilers are up here at the very start. And then you can see, but does that mean we're gonna run this size to this boiler here? No. Are we gonna run a 1-inch gas pipe to all the way from the meter to the boiler? Probably not. So that's why I always talk about the gas piping, because it can be an issue out there. There's what we call volume, and then we have pressure. So if you ever do have to call Viessmann's tech support, we're gonna ask you those questions. What is your standing pressure and what's your running pressure? So we're going to take to see if we are looking for drops, and that's usually a volume issue. So just make sure you're doing your gas piping and your venting correctly. It will save you a lot of headaches down the road. So looking at our recommended flow rates a little bit here on our boilers, as you can see with the 20-degree delta T. There are your delta T's there, and your GPM flow rates. These are taken right out of our tech data manual, where you can find right on that pro login site. Once you click on the CM2 boiler for information, it will come up with all the information that you need: the tech data manual, your installation, your installation manuals. Your service manuals are all up on that pro logging. So if you want to look up any of your technical information as well, if you're sizing the job, a lot of great information on that pro resources site. So as you can see, there's no minimum flow rates on this boiler. There's no flow switch required unless you need it secondary next to your low water cutoff. You can always put a flow switch into your system. We don't have to pipe this boiler primary, secondary, so that means there's no dedicated boiler pump required, no high head pumps required as well. So we're less susceptible to flow fluctuations and a better design for mismatch and micro loads as well. Remember, micro loads might just pull a little bit of water off the boiler, so with the larger volumes of water in the boilers, it might just be pulling water on and not even cycle. So as you can see at the bottom, for an example, a CM2 500 recommended flow rate at a 20-degree delta T equals about 171 GPMs per minute. Friction loss through the boiler, as you can see, is fairly low. That's 22.5 inches of water column. So that's pretty low. Just going over different pipe connections and different piping. Here's 3 CM2s tied together, and they're tied a direct connect. So that means we have no dedicated pumps here. We have pumps going out to our system only. As well as you can see, we tied in an indirect storage tank on here as well, which is another consideration, as you'll see coming up, piping into your indirects, or how many indirects, or just showing you sensor placements. Now we're still doing a direct connect with 2 boilers here, but now we showed redundancy on our pumps. So one pump fails, we have the redundancy just to kick one over. See a lot of that out in the field, especially in schools and places like that. So now we're looking at two CM2s piped together, primary, secondary. So now you can see now we have to add in boiler pumps, as well as our system pumps, as well as our low loss header or our closely spaced tees, depending on how you're doing your system separation. You can still do it this way if needed. So the boiler can do it either way. So now we're looking at two CM2s with multiple tanks installed here. And this here, we're going to do first in, last out on our piping for our indirect tanks, or use some type of balanced flow system, balancing valves or something like that. So we heat each individual tank on the same values going to each tank. We also do sell horizontal tanks. So this is just showing you our stackable horizontals. Right now they go up to the highest, I believe, is 120-gallon stainless steel storage tanks as well. And you can stack them up here, I think 3 high, and I think you can have up to 12. We can do multiple tanks, or we can hook in our Vitocrossal, which was new last year to the market. That's all done with flat plate heat exchangers. So that actually can produce about 180 gallons per minute out of that flat plate heat exchanger. So now you can see we're offering a bunch of different options to make hot water as well. And part of your piping, do you want to pipe in 14 Vitocrossals or 1 Vitocrossal? So it can be a time saver as well. You might have to add a buffer tank to that Vitocrossal, but still a lot less than 14 storage tanks. Looking at the rear of the panel, that's where you're going to mount this. So if you're getting this boiler broke down, you're going to mount your rear electrical panel. There is a harness rail. So all your harness goes all the way here to the front of your control. Then you're going to mount your control and then pull all your wires up. And then you'll see that all your plugs are all numbered to go into a certain spot, and you can't really screw them up. So it makes it pretty easy for installation. But if, like I said, if you've never done one before, give yourself some time, because jackets look similar. They go on one side or the other. And boxes, you're breaking down your boxes. So now you can see that that harness is already mounted to the back control. So basically you're screwing that junction box to the back of the boiler after you put your jackets on. Then you can see there's 2 mechanical grounds here and here. Those actually go into the screws that you're mounting the jacket on with, the box on. So you put those your mechanical grounds on your screws that you're mounting the box with. Here's your connections to the back, where your pumps are going to go to the back, as well as those connections that are coming in from the factory harness as well. With these pumps, you're most likely going to put some type of pump starter, ribby relay, or some type of isolation relay to isolate the voltage, because on these boilers here, you're looking at about 6.5 amps for all your pumps. All your low voltage, your sensors, all of that are going to come up into your top control, your boiler control itself. All your sensors go into here, as well as, like, if you're using any mixing valves, can go directly here to the boiler. Mixing valves, as soon as you tie them into our boiler via the 145 communication, it now knows it has it tied to the boiler, as well as our domestic number 5 sensor. Once you learn our numbering system on our boilers, they're pretty much the same from the 200 right up to this commercial boiler as well. So all the sensors are pretty much the same numbers, and they all go into the same spots. So it's showing you some of the accessories. So if you're doing a combustion vent damper here, this is the parts that you would get with the boiler here. Excuse me, that's if you're doing multiple boilers. Here's our mixing valve extension kit, as well as our mixing valve actuators, the body, as well as they all have a strap-on sensor for your outlet of your boiler. And I believe these come up to, I believe, 2-inch. I'm not 100% on the size of that. I'm still stuck in my residential mode here. Other things that we do offer, the Vitogate 300 for your building management. That would go on that backed-in rail of the control itself on the back of the boiler as well. We offer condensate neutralizers. That should be part of something that you're taking a look at during your annual maintenance. Excuse me. As well as there's a look at the seismic bracket for the people out there in California. As well as we can customize for jobs as well as custom panels. If you're going over the 8 on the system, you might then need a custom rack system, which is made at right in our facility in Canada. I believe it was last year that we, this company's been making our controls for years. We actually bought the company last year, so it's part of Viessmann now. Just take a quick look at our indirect storage tanks. We offer the 300 series titanium infused stainless steel tanks, and that's the coil itself. And then the outer shells are 444 stainless steel that handles the harder chlorides. As you can see, there's our horizontal tanks as well. They're about 120 gallon tanks. They go down to 41 gallons, where you can put our residential oil boiler on top of this as well. The neat thing about the horizontal tanks is if steam is in your world, they can handle steam pressures as well. So pretty neat thing. A lot of people don't see that. Looking at that production kit here. This is a skip package. So you can get it either with single wall flat plate heat exchangers or double wall flat plate heat exchangers, depending on where you're putting this thing. Hospitals sometimes require the double wall heat exchangers. But as you can see, we can produce up to about 180 gallons per minute, which is quite a bit of water. It's a really neat system. If you got time, we do have I think a webinar on this, as well as a video. Looking at the control on the boiler itself and looking at what the buttons and functions mean on it here. So starting on the left-hand side here is what we call our override test switch. That there, if you put that rocker on, it will fire the boiler up to limit. So if say you got in a jam, you could actually hit that and the boiler would fire into limit. Just make sure you don't close your cover, because there's a little button on there. So when you close the cover, it will take it out of override or test. The 2 little lights on the left-hand bottom corner is one, you'll know that it's running when the green light's on and powered up. And if you have a red light in there, it normally is flashing, and that would mean that you would have indicated that there's a fault. On the right-hand side is your power kill switch to the control. And then you have a couple of fuses in the front there, the 2 6.3 fuses. And then if you want to see what this control is and what model of the control it is, there's normally a rating plate sticker right here. You normally have to take a little cover off, pops right off, and then you'll see what you're working on right there. So as you can see, this boiler can be a single boiler. This control rather can be work on the single control. It can be the lead control, or it can be the lag control. And you can change that, like I said, from being the lead control to the lag control by hours. So normally with somebody calling, I was walking them through programming, I would normally set it to every 200 hours. If we're doing some type of cascading, that it now, after it runs 200 hours, it will rotate to the next boiler. It has the startup wizard on here, so it's made it really easy for the control now to start up the boiler when you start it up. It's got the new large touch screen control. Like I said, the gateway does go in the back of the boiler on our DIN rail, and then you can do BMS manager to this boiler as well. You can do 2 different temperatures right out, actually 3 different temperatures right out of the control itself, 2 mixed, 1 high temp. Domestic production as well as DHW recirculation, all different types of setback times on this boiler here. We can reduce our boil water temperature with night setback, our heating setback, and if you are doing recirculation, we can do a recirculation time program right out of the boiler itself. Holiday programs here in the US, we call those vacations. I know we're all looking for a vacation, right? Integrating long modules. So that's at BMS. So this is what's looking at the MW2C. And by the way, this control is, once you learn the navigation of it, it's no different than the MW2C cascade control for the 200 cascading wall hung boilers. So once you learn the controls on each boiler, they're very similar in how they apply. And so you'll know the 200s as well as this control, the GW6B. The GW6B, what that stands for is the B stands for on the boiler. And if you see a GW6C, that's usually in the CA3 boiler there. That just means it's in the cabinet. So B on boiler, C on the cabinet. Because as you can see, the GW6B comes a B model and a C model, and then the MW2C is normally going to mount on a wall or on the closest, not the closest, but your low loss header. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought there for a second. So as you can see, when you first initially start the boiler up, it's going to ask you, do you want to keep it in North American English? You're just going to hit OK. Or on the newer control, it's going to be a check mark. It's a little different. They just upgraded it right prior to this all starting here. I have them on the boilers at thing here. This control actually has a check mark now instead of OK. Next thing it's going to ask you is set your time and date. I highly recommend setting your time and dates because we do time programs. Fault and codes can be looked at in time and date as well. So to me, it's an important thing to do. As well as we can change it from Celsius to Fahrenheit. And then here at applications, we're going to make it a single boiler, a lead boiler, or a lag boiler. And that's where you would make that change. And this is right on your initial startup right here. Once you check all those off, you hit OK on each one, and you're good to go. If you need to restart up the startup wizard, you can restart it up. So if you make a mistake, you can go right back and restart up the startup wizard and start right from the beginning again. The new touchscreen makes it really nice, so you can actually see your physical changes if you're doing heating curves, or there's our holiday program, which is that vacation mode. If you want to make time programs for your heating, it would be in the heating. If you want to make domestic time programs, it would be in the domestic. If you had solar attached to the boiler, with our solar controls, it would auto recognize, and so you would see solar programming in here as well. On the right hand side, as you're setting up your heating curves, and by the way, all our heating curves do come defaulted at the 1.4 heating curve. At 1.4 heating curve, that's about 167. That's maximum temperature in Germany. By law, they're not supposed to exceed 167 degrees. So that's why most of all our boilers are all defaulted at the 1.4. A lot of your programming for your burner and natural gas to propane conversions are done here on your burner control. So this is the VUC 310 burner control. And so a lot of even your faults are going to be here. Your extended faults are going to be here as well. All your safeties, our safety times come to here as well. It will tell you when you first initially start up this boiler, you take a look at this control. It's going to tell you whether you're at 100% of the firing rate. That is because you can reduce it, but it will say 100% of your firing rate. The next thing after that is going to say, okay, you're in natural gas or propane. And then right after that, am I in high or low altitude? So as soon as you start up the boiler, take a look at the control. It'll tell you whether it's been set up for natural gas or propane right on the control itself as you initially start up the boiler. there are all the things that do get connected to the boiler. So your the gas valve safety checks there, 1 and 2 are there, and your inlet damper, that's where that's going to go. So remember, that's where we get wired, and you plug that in when you're using that food damper. The domestic, I'm sorry, your boiler water temperature sensor goes up here in the well. So on some of the models, they go here, and then some of the newer models, they go up on the back side of it. These sensors are actually 2 sensors into that one lead there, and one's your boiler operating temperature sensor, and one is your fixed high limit. These are constantly checking each other, so if they drift off from each other within 2 degrees, you will get a fault. On the back of the boilers are food temperature sensors. Those are your 15A and 15B food temperature sensors. Same thing with these, there's 1 sensor into 1 cap. Same thing here is if they differ, and this says 0.5 C, so that's a half of Celsius. That's 2 degrees roughly. So now you can see a better look at that polypropylene flue temperature flue collector in the back of the boiler, as you can see the Crossal batten in the back as well. So now you can see the other safeties that get tied into that control, right near the control, that 3A, your boiler operating, your fixed high limit, the 53, your 15A, 15B, and then that 40 plug. '41 going over to the boilers, always power to the burner control on any of our boilers, even our residential. 41 plug was always the power to the burner. 40 is always going to be powered to the boiler itself. So once you, like I said, once you learn our numbering systems, they're pretty much the same across the board. So there are no mechanical limits, but there are a lot of redundancy on this boiler. And as you can see, that 3A, 3B is your boiler water temperature sensors. To get a lifetime out of these boilers, we do want to make sure we got good quality water going into the boiler. We want to check our total house hardness. So we really don't want to be over about 200 parts of per million. And our pH levels, just like anything else, 8.2 to 9.5. You can have a lot of places check your water today. Plumbing supply houses do it, as well as Viessmann can tell you who exactly or who you can go to. Fuel gas requirements are pretty much the same right across the board, and this is from our smallest 100 boiler right up to our CA3 boiler as well. So once you learn our fuel requirements, 4 to 14 for natural gas and 10 to 14 for propane. And at this point here, I talk about this quite often because even in residential as well as commercial, what we're taking out of there could have been an atmospheric boiler with ribbon burners. And when the gas piping is too small with ribbon burners, what happens is the flame just gets smaller. We get to a power burner, we start sucking in gas, and then we need to premix with our fan. So that's when you might find a volume issue. With this boiler, there is an orifice change on it, as well as a programming change. This is the orifice for the smaller boilers here, as you can see. On the larger ones, they're not going to have this pin. As you'll see, there's a pin on this one here for the smaller ones. On your larger ones, you're going to see a chamfered edge, and that chamfered edge is going to go towards the gas valve. It's a pretty quick change. There's 4 little nuts on there, as you can see them. Take the 4 nuts off, and then you can take your 2 gaskets and then your plate and stick it in there, and you're done. As you can see, the smaller ones do have a pin, and then on the larger ones, there's no pin, but like I said, you're going to put that chamfered in towards the gas valve. If you do switch this boiler over to propane, you do have to check and switch that low gas pressure switch from 4 inches of water column, because remember that's our minimum for natural gas. And we're going to bump it up to 9 inches of water column for propane. To make fuel adjustments on the boiler, on the left-hand side, you're looking at your high fire gas adjustment, and then on the right-hand side, you're looking at your low fire gas adjustment. So normally this is a big blue gas valve here. You take the blue cap off the top, and then you'll use an Allen wrench or a torque wrench and make the adjustments on the large, as well as you're going to take a screwdriver cap off of the small size and adjust that. Once you make that change for propane, you're going to go here and make the adjustment. This is just something I cut out of the manual and shows you how to do it step-by-step procedures in there. Here's just a video that I put in here just to show you how to do that procedure. So hopefully I'm keeping you guys awake and I don't have to throw an eraser at anybody. So now he's setting it to propane, and once he does that, he's gonna restart it with the reset, just so you can see when you first initially start up the boiler, there's gonna tell you right now that you're at 100% of the operation, you're on LPG, and you're on low altitude. So he just hits the reset button so you can see the boiler restart, so you can actually see that function that I was talking about earlier. So to make your high fire adjustment, and here's your CO2s on high fire as well as your CO2s on low fire. On this here, we're going to make small increments with your high fire, and keep checking your O2 or your CO2 levels on your combustion analyzer. So you're going to be doing this while your analyzer's in the flue, checking this. Once you do your high fire, then you're going to go down to your low fire and do smaller increments as well. Keep checking, and then once you're done, you should be within the range as you're seeing for high fire, for natural gas, as well as low fire for propane, or high fire for propane, either one. Excuse me. So here's just another video of him showing you how to go into the reduce mode. The way he's showing you here, as well as he's going to leave that in, so when he restarts it, you can see when it what he reduced it down to. But when you're doing these tests, you're going to go all the way down to 0 for low fire and all the way up to 100% for high fire. So let's take a look. Usually we were in the lab and we're doing all this hands-on. So now you can see he's reducing the output of the boiler here. And then, for the test, you would go all the way to 0 for low fire. So now he's going to restart the boiler just to show you that he left it in there to reduce that firing rate, so your maximum heating output. So now you'll see he reduced it down to 74%. We're in natural gas. We're at low altitude. But for the tests, you're going to drop that arrow all the way down here and drop that down to 0. That's low fire on this boiler. So when you're in that modulation and you'll reduce it down to 0, you'll see it go down to the lowest modulation. That's where you're going to do your combustion test and check your CO2s at that, and then increase it back all the way up while you're in that test. and put it to 100%, and that's high fire. So it makes it pretty quick and easy to do. Taking a look at the job, like I said, these jobs become workabouts. I appreciate any time you guys put in a boiler. I'll take any nice pictures and I'll post them up here. Nice looking job here. I wish all the boilers rooms that we went to were this nice and clean and spotless. So we did list some of the key features and benefits of the boiler. Remember, the heat exchanger to me is one of the biggest benefits of this boiler here. How efficient the boiler is, common applications. You pretty much can get this in a house. And we do have them in very large houses. So we have some with 2 of these boilers in their house. So they are very universal in their applications. The shipping methods we went over, you can get it broke down or you can assemble it yourself. And what the benefits of that methods are, you can get them through the doorways, or it will save you time and labor by not putting it together as well. The venting options and materials, we went over the 2-pipe, single pipe, room dependent air. And just remember, I see a lot of this because I talk to the field techs a lot. So make sure you're doing some type of filtration for your fresh air. I just think it's very beneficial in the long run. At this point here,
All right, we'll give everyone about 30 seconds. Feel free to type in any questions you have.
but if you remember a question after we leave, you'll see Miranda's going to have her email address up here coming up, as well as if you want to go rewatch it and you might have missed something, you'll be able to see this again within the next few weeks, as well as all the other ones we do. We have other trainers out there. We had a neat one the other day on proper sizing of a residential house of your piping. So that's now should be coming up on the webinar website, as well as Jody's done quite a few on different things as well. As well as that Vitocrossal that we talked about. He did another one on condensation and the reason why we want these boilers. So there's a lot of little neat things if you want to learn and you're bored. Some days they're only an hour or so you can fill your day.
Absolutely. All right, Jay, looks like we do not have any questions that came through.
All right, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I appreciate you spending that last hour with us. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death with this one here. And maybe you picked up a couple of little helpful tools. And I just want to say, stay safe out there and be looking forward to seeing you at the facility. And I can feel that happening sooner than later because we all got to get back to work here and get away from my wife's laundry list that she has me do every day. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Jay. Just a few reminders before we close out. As stated in the beginning, this is going to be recorded and added to the video library. Like Jay said, we have a ton of webinars up there. We have the near boiler piping webinar coming up next week, as well as a sizing and understanding combi boilers next week. So if you want to register for those, feel free to go to the website as well to do that. Jay will be doing a presentation on the 27th and 28th this month on the CA3B. So if you want to attend that as well, feel free to register. Like Jay mentioned, if you go back and rewatch it or think of any questions after this, my email is on the screen. Feel free to email me any questions you have. We will be putting together a Q&A document that will go out to everyone that attended today with all of the associated answers. And lastly, you will receive a follow-up email. Please just take the time to fill out the quick survey to help us further improve our webinars and pick some new topics for webinars and upcoming classes. With that being said, that concludes our webinar today. Thank you for attending and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.